Alright, I think I have this recording set up. Welcome to something slightly different. If the last thing I was doing was let's appreciate a thing which I very much love and want to show you from the inside, think of this as let's despise. You might recognize what you're looking at already. It's a new thing. Hasn't had time to become famous one way or the other really, but it was a bit of a YouTube meme. This is Warhammer 40k Boltgun, and I absolutely hate it. Let's go look at it. So again, like I was saying about Halo, but I don't feel the need to be really robust or thorough here because I think this is a piece of junk. I am again just thinking, I'm not really showing myself off playing a game. I am going to kind of talk about it and treat it like a living museum piece. And we're just going to explore the perverted minds of the idiots who could make something like this, because I think that's a halfway interesting thing to do. I've written a bit about why I hate this piece of junk, but that's not really quite the same as, you know, I can just get inside it and show it to you, can't I? Pardon me, I have a tendency to close up my throat while speaking into a microphone. I don't know what's up with that. I hope my voice isn't unpleasant to listen to right now. Sorry, that's getting really absurd. I'll try to speak more properly. So here we are collecting our little Doom bits, and yeah, that's kind of the first thing that I want to go into, what's obviously wrong with this game. If I was to describe it, I would say, like, what is the problem? I would say that it's kind of the delusional nature which is at the root of why this thing exists. What is this piece of junk? Who was it made for? Why am I playing a game which looks like this, which came out in 2023 when you saw the 2001 game I was playing before, maybe? It looked a bit more complex than this in a lot of ways. It looked more mature and sophisticated in what it was trying to do. How did we get here? 20 years passed between this and Halo Combat Evolved, and you might think there was some kind of apocalypse or this game was made in Central Africa, but no, I'm pretty sure this is British, and again, what happened? Well, I believe what happened is that this game is a product of a kind of mass delusion. Again, as I said, it's kind of the living tradition of doing interesting things within video games basically died. Year to year there was this very organic attempt at one-upping what existed, building on existing ideas, and then we had a kind of Obama dark age around 2008. Things started going horrible. Tech became a kind of crutch and focus in a very bad way, which rather than enabling new things, it kind of dovetailed with the introduction of new audiences who didn't appreciate the past to create kind of a perfect storm of rapid decay, loss of knowledge, loss of standards, severance of tradition. What happened very quickly was pretty much everything that was being worked towards was discarded for new standards which were very shallow, very expensive, encouraged very stupid things to come into being. And basically the living tradition of, again, yes, doing interesting things within virtual spaces died. Halo was a bigger, cooler in every way expansion of the premise of a work like Quake, which was a bigger and cooler expansion of the premise of a work like Doom and Blood. It was very much every few years things were getting bigger, more ambitious, more interesting, new visions being realized, and then we kind of hit the Obama dark age, and everything collapses into a big heap of expensive nothing to entertain Mexicans who have Xboxes now. And then, how do we get from that to here? This does not look like a flashier Call of Duty made by 5,000 people. Pardon me again, that's just throat. Yes, how did we get here? It's kind of comparable to the emergence of kind of the abstractions in painting art in the early 20th century, if you're familiar with how Anthony Ludovici explored that whole situation, but why would you be? That's absurd of me to raise that as though you would know. How I should be raising this is just that it's a useful equivalence. What happened was, sort of like the neoclassicalism of the period, an extreme refinement of techniques coincided with pretty much a complete lack of ideas and a lack of personal expression. And this created the kind of mistake or illusion that the problem was that as your techniques get better, you just kind of lose soul, like it's some kind of equation. The more rigorous and the more complex your technique, the less interesting the things you paint are. But of course that's not the problem. You don't become interesting by compromising your technique. You do not need to heal or correct the tools or techniques in any way. You need to heal the souls of the artists. Of course, why painting got boring in the early 20th century was men who had not experienced life or the world, men who had not yet had the chance to develop a rich character, had skills which outstripped, they had a capacity to express which outstripped their inner lives, the things that they actually had to express. And that's a similar situation to where video games found themselves, where we had greater tools and capacities than had ever existed, and not due to failings or limitations of personal artists, more a kind of arrangement of circumstances of what games were being made for who, and a kind of American aversion to putting interesting people in charge of things, which emerged for various reasons. We ended up with this situation where basically nothing was being done with extraordinary tools, and rather than looking at Japan, which was the right answer, and seeing that, okay, what happens is you need to have a little bit of faith and put an auteur in charge of these tools, have some faith in a weird outsider, a kind of artist personality who came up through proving themselves in expression rather than just the guy who's been programming your engine for 20 years. They could have done that, but instead what happened was they made the mistake that happened in painting 100 years ago. They decided, technique is the problem, how do you put the soul back? At some arbitrary point in the past, they had more soul because they had less graphics or something. And, you know, let that meme circulate around for a while. A Brazilian creates a very cool Doom mod, which kind of revives interest in Doom, and we get this abomination, which is kind of, why does this game exist? Partially out of that meme I just described, in which you have more soul if you have less power, more primitive technique, and partially out of the kind of false nostalgia wave in which it's the mass delusion again, which I alluded to far before and then got a bit off track explaining the origins of that. It's this idea that people are kind of aware that tradition is dead and ashamed that they don't have, even within gaming, a young and vulgar culture. People are capable of feeling uncultured within that, and what comes of that, I'm sorry, I have a tendency to bounce around rather than play games. It helps me think, I think. It's a nice idle way to explore. What comes of that feeling of kind of unculturedness is a desire to compensate by, you know, leaning into the past, and we get this odd situation where people, rather than just going back and playing the games, which are more accessible than they've ever been, it's very easy to play Doom or play for free, people instead kind of, you know, you consume YouTube content and merchandise about the thing, and then things like this are made for that kind of insecure person where you are able to, by playing something like this, it's very consciously marketed to the idea of, if you play this, it has all the sensibilities of a new, crappy, soulless thing, but it's marketed like, yeah, the kind of cool person from the 90s who was down with the authentic hardcore stuff. They were playing stuff like this and they would totally appreciate this, so, you know, you might have missed Doom, but if you get Boltgun, you're kind of caught up. I believe that's why video games get remade now on one hand, and I believe that it's why we get these grotesque throwbacks like this at the same time. It's this sense that people have missed out and also don't really have an authentic will to just explore the things as they are. They just want to feel like they're part of gamer culture and, you know, rather than just playing an old game. I just like the idea of presenting it like it's homework, like, I play games made before I was born and enjoy them. It should just be something that you like if you actually like these things, but the bizarre situation we find is that people are... Yes, there's the thing I was after. People are basically not that interested, not as interested as they feel like they should be, and you know, playing an old game is seen sort of like how it's sort of like a letterboxed person's attitude to movies, like a big letterboxed person, or the attitude of someone like Logo Daedalus towards books. Like, you know, on one hand they want to be seen as like the person who's into that, but at the same time they can't help but, you know, they're not, and they see it as like a kind of homework or a chore that's necessary to inhabit the desired identity. And then the appeal of something like Boltgun, or, you know, movie recaps on YouTube, or just reading about books and authors on Wikipedia, is that it's kind of a way to cheat on your homework and get into the identity of a thing just by getting enough of the identifying traits to pass the kind of superficial test without actually getting into them. And again, this happens with anything. I'm not saying it's a particular video game problem, it's just the kind of general problem of posers, which is a problem of culture being offered to people who really just aren't curious or stable enough in their lives to, you know, really understand how leisure works and actually find themselves and know what they're into to the point they can enjoy life. And it's very... I don't even know what I just picked up. I really don't care about this game. I'll talk about the game itself in a minute, I swear, guys, but... Anyway, what was I thinking? Yes, it's kind of the general problem of people who feel outside of culture, very embarrassed about that. They want to be within something, and again, this video game, I feel like it exists to assuage gamer guilt and the sense of having not being down with the canon, having missed out on the glory days, you know. This is I really should have said this before now, the whole boomer shooter phenomena, forgive me, is really a kind of homework cheat for gamer history, where you can feel down with tradition, you can feel like you've earned your hardcore stripes, and you haven't really engaged with the past. And again, the idea that that is something you have to do for like identification is itself very corrupt and disgusting. I wouldn't feel impressed if someone told me that they forced themselves to play old games so they could, you know, belong or be allowed to talk about them. You know, if it interests you, explore it, and if it doesn't, don't. If you are generally interested in a phenomena like I am in this game, that also makes sense to do something you don't enjoy. But the point of all of this is meant to be that we like it, and I really, frankly, I don't believe people if they say that they like a game like this, because it's just not well crafted for reasons I might elaborate on if I ever get bored of this sociological tangent. This is a very boring game, and I think it primarily sells to insecure people who like the idea of themselves playing it more than the actual act of playing it. I don't see people playing this in 20 years, I don't see people playing it a year from now. In fact, the initial YouTube hype wave over that moronic, nostalgia-affecting, absurd trailer, that's all worn off. The initial wave of YouTube soy people reactions. What's left at this point? Does anyone even remember this game? Did I miss the boat to capitalize on outrage and so on? Probably, but, you know, if anything, that's a better time. Now that the reputation has completely worn off, you can just see this thing as the absurd waste of time that it is. And what was that, 15 minutes? That might be a good introductory video, and that's one level cleared, and I might just do another since I feel like talking. I'm having fun, hope you are too, as always. Thank you.